All right. Back with a little bit of soccer talk. We don't do this a lot, but when we do
Yes.
it, it's meaningful. And
Damn
we got
right.
the perfect guy to do it. We don't do a lot of the wrestling talk, but when it's soccer, it means something here, folks. So obviously the big news that's worldwide is we got a pretty big superstar coming here to Toronto, and obviously you guys know who I'm talking about. We're talking about Lorenzo Insigne leaving
I like
Joe's
how you
favorite
pronounce his
team.
name, Frankie.
Sorry,
I like how you pronounce his name.
you got to put a little bit of European.
Insigne with a little Italian
Insigne,
accent. It's beautiful.
Insigne, and funny thing is here, he's leaving Joe's favorite team, coming to Joe's favorite team,
It is
and MLS
true.
at least. So
Yes, it is true. Yep.
this is a big deal. This is big, and why this is big, because my whole thing was I am looking at this from a world soccer standpoint, not a league standpoint. This is a world renowned player who contributed a lot to the Italian Euro win last summer. So, and I'm not a big soccer fan. I'm a casual soccer fan. I'll be honest with you. Obviously, I know who he is. I know who he plays for. But the impact it has on people like me, who the casual sports fan is, already saying, how can I get tickets to watch TFC? Because he's a world class player, and he will attract other world class players to Toronto. We've had one in Jovinko. We now have even a bigger one in Insigne. So I want to get Joe's take on what this really means for the MLS, Toronto, and then I'm going to throw Joe a curveball at the end here, and I'm curious to get the fans, our listeners' reaction on it too. So, Joe, why don't you start off? We want to know about Insigne, your thoughts, and really what does this mean for TFC?
Well, it's great for the city of Toronto, great for TFC, but like you said, it's great for MLS. I would say he's probably the best player to have signed in MLS. There were bigger stars that signed in MLS, David Beckham, Ibrahimovic. These guys are way bigger stars in the grand scheme of things worldwide. But those guys joined the league when they were well past their prime, in their 30s. This was like the final lap of their career. Whereas Insigne is very different. This is a guy who's still starting on his national team. They just won a major competition this past summer. And he's joining while he's still in his prime. And MLS hasn't really had that, where they've taken a star out of Europe who's deciding, you know what, I'm going to switch here and I'm going to move the family to North America and ply my trade there. It's huge for the league. Hopefully other players in similar situations who might be out of contract, who are looking outside the box, may look at his situation and say, hey, I can make a lot of good money to move to North America. I don't have to be under the spotlight that I am here in Europe. And some guys like that. Jovinko has been on the record of saying that he really liked that when he came over here. So I do think it will open some doors. I've heard a lot of comparisons to Jovinko and Lorenzo. Obviously, they're both Italian, they're both small. But you got to understand, when Jovinko came here, when he was signed by TFC, he was hardly playing at Juventus. He was like barely getting minutes. So at the point in their careers when they both signed with TFC, Insigne is a much better player, much more accomplished player. This does nothing to say anything against what Jovinko accomplished at TFC. Because if Insigne can come here and accomplish what Jovinko accomplished, it's a great signing. Because Jovinko was one of the best players in MLS for a few seasons, was dominant, scored huge goals, led them to a championship, almost led them to a CONCACAF championship. So Lorenzo's got some big shoes to fill, so to speak, some big little shoes to fill in terms of what Jovinko was able to bring. But in terms of their careers at this moment, Insigne is much more accomplished and a better player.
So let's look at the TFC aspect of this. Obviously, we know they had a really tough year last year. The Michael Bradley's still there, and that Bradley Senior's coming on board to coach the
Damn
team
right.
now. So I know they've lost Altidore. I think he's not. I think he's done. He ain't
They
coming
haven't
back.
released them yet, but they're looking for to get out of that deal. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, Insigne is going to be a big help to them up front. But you're talking about a team that finished like next to dead last in the league. How much better can they be? And obviously they're going to make some more moves, but do they still have a long way to go for them to get back to the glory years of, getting to the finals, winning, winning the whole thing? And like, where are they now with this signing?
So I think they have a lot of moves to make to be competitive again, but I think they still can do it. They made a huge deal today to get rid of some money, basically trading away a forward, Dom Dwyer, and their third overall pick in the MLS Super Draft to get rid of his money, because the cap in MLS is relatively small. But they have 3 designated player spots, and those players' money does not count towards that cap. So they're trying to free up money under the cap so they can make other moves. I think there's going to be a lot more subtractions before we start seeing more additions, namely Altidore. But there's a lot of moves to make, but I think they can turn it around rather quickly. They still have some really solid pieces. Bradley, I know he's in the twilight of his career. I still think he could be a really serviceable player, captain of the team. I don't think he should be playing every game, every minute anymore. I think that's crazy for someone his age. And then they've got, Osorio, who's also a great player. They still have Pozuelo, one of the best players in MLS. They just lost Richie Larea, which is a huge loss also for them. Canadian international who joined second division team Nottingham Forest in England. So they're going to have to replace him. Still a lot of steps to go, but when you have a guy that you're bringing on like Insigne, to pair him up with Pozuelo, that your attack has got some special ingredients to it already.
So I just want to clarify. You're saying Altidore is out the door, right?
It looks that way. I'm not an insider or anything, but it doesn't sound like he's coming back.
And okay, so lastly, from a roster perspective, rumors are swirling. He may not be the only Italian coming here from the motherland. Is it possible we see another member of the Italian national team join him? Be it Belotti? We've heard some other names. We've heard some other names. I believe it's Criscito as well.
Domenico Criscito, yeah.
Could that be a name as well? Are there any other names you're hearing? Could somebody be Could Insigne be bringing his paisans with him to Toronto?
I'm skeptical of it happening this season, to be honest. It may take a season of Insigne playing in MLS and, talking to the boys back home, the paisans from back home, and trying to convince them to come over. I think once he gets here and plays here, he'll fall in love with it just as Jovinko did, because, in Toronto, there's a great Italian population, but it's also a great diverse city. There's so many places to go, places to see. It's a world-class city. So I think down the road, they will probably bring more Italians. And TFC, one of the things that Bill Manning said was they wanted to bring an Italian because they saw how big that Italian national team championship, what a big deal it was in this city. So when you have that and you recognize that, to bring in one of those players to here, let's face it, it's a business. They're going to sell a lot of tickets. So bringing in another player from there would probably do the same thing. I'm sure they're looking into it. I'm skeptical of it happening this season.
Smart man, Bill Manning. All right. Yes or no, Joe? One word answer. You can expand it on if you want, but Italy gets past North Macedonia. They get past Portugal. Is Insigne on this team come World Cup in Qatar?
100%. There's no way.
And you know why I asked that, right? You know why I asked that, and the rumors.
I know, because it typically in the past with the national team, if you leave Serie A, not even just going to MLS, but players that leave Italy have had a hard time being on the national team. However, this guy is a starter on their team, plays almost every game. I can't see a scenario where Mancini says, "Oh, just because you moved to Canada, you're not going to be on the national team anymore," even though everybody knows you're one of our best players. So I can't see it happening.
Wow. We know a little bit about.
I am skeptical of them even qualifying for the World Cup. And now Chiesa just tore his ACL.
In a perfect world, I know. I just said, but we all know about Italian politics and soccer, but I'll leave that for another conversation. All right. Joe, to end this off, Toronto is known to bring in some big-time free agents in really every sport across the city. So I looked at a list of the top 5 biggest free agent signings in Toronto sports history, and I want you to tell me where, in your opinion, where Insigne falls in this list. We have Roger Clemens, 4-year, $40 million contract with the Jays. We have, another one, Jermaine Defoe, $10 million transfer on a 4-year deal to Toronto FC. It was the bloody big deal. Hakeem Olajuwon, if you remember him in the twilight of his career, a 3-year, $18 million deal with the sign and trade with the Raptors. Didn't really go great, but still a big game. Here's a blast from the past. Rocket Ishmael. This was a huge deal back in the early 90s because he was trying to decide between the NFL and the CFL, if you can believe it at that time, because you actually made more money in the CFL, if you can believe that, back in 91. So that was a huge deal. And coming to number 5, John Tavares, the big free agent, which really hasn't really happened to that day in the NHL. A player of that magnitude leaving his team, the Islanders, and signing with his hometown Toronto Maple Leafs. So, Joe, of those 5 largest signings or biggest free agent signings, where will Lorenzo Insigne fall in this category?
Honestly, he falls on the list, no doubt. I would say it's definitely behind Clemens, seeing as where Clemens was in his career. He was still an amazing pitcher at that time. He was a superstar in North America. It's definitely behind Tavares because, let's face it, this is a Leafs town still. And when they signed the biggest free agent and they hadn't done that in years, decades, that was huge news. I think it's behind Rocket Ishmael because, like you said, Rocket Ishmael had suitors from NFL and Canada chose to come to Canada because he was going to be paid more. In context of the news that brought back then, I think that is above it. But I'm going to put Insigne above Olajuwon because Olajuwon was the end of his career.
Yep. Fair.
And I'm going to put it above Defoe because I think in terms of Toronto, I think Insigne was a bigger star than Defoe, even though we know that the Premier League is number 1 in the GTA in terms of popularity amongst the fan base. So even though Defoe played there and it was a bloody big deal, I think this is, how do you say an even bigger deal in Italian?
Tutto grande.
Più grande deal. Più grande.
My wife's sleeping. Okay, she's my Italian dictionary here. But yeah, but it's big, and that's how I was going to ask you. Compare Defoe and Insigne, but I think you made that pretty clear that Insigne is obviously ahead of where Defoe was when he signed here.
Yeah, and Defoe was still a really good player then as well. Had played on the national team before, but wasn't like a star. He wasn't a starter for England at that time.
Yeah.
He was still making national team appearances, I believe, but he was coming on as a sub. He's not starting the Euro final this past summer, like not at that level.
So there you have it, folks.
And Insigne is playing for one of the top teams in Italy still, who are vying for the Scudetto, which is probably one of the main reasons why he's coming in July, because he wants to see the season through and try to deliver Napoli a championship, which they haven't had since Maradona was on the team in the early 90s. So
summarize that's obviously this is one of the largest, most influential, impactful signings in Toronto sports history. So this is, and you know what? I like this because it puts MLS on the map again, for a city that's, I think, starving for it. Yeah. And it's got a really great fan base. If you haven't been to a game or been around the exhibition, it's a great fan base and it's growing. And especially, obviously, the grassroots here starting to be bigger than hockey, believe it or not, folks. So I think this is going to be great for that program. Big for our area, Vaughan, Woodbridge, oddly enough. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see an Insigne signing at like Père Louis or something.
That's right. He should. He fits that style brand for sure. And one last thing before we go.
Yes, please.
I'm still a little shocked by it. I'm not going to lie. Like when we heard reports that this was happening.
Exactly.
I thought that it was being leaked by his agents and he wanted to just try to get Napoli to match the price or at least boost their price. Let me put it into context for people who don't understand. This is a kid who's from Naples, grew up a Napoli fan, came up through the youth system. They put him on loan for a couple seasons, came back to Napoli. He's now the captain of his hometown team and is now trying to win them a championship. It would be like Mitch Marner leaving the Leafs to go to the KHL. And a KHL team could offer Mitch Marner $25 million tomorrow. He's not leaving the Leafs to go to the KHL. It's not happening. So this is a damn big deal and a damn big surprise still for me. And I'm glad that even though he's leaving my team Napoli, he's not leaving me because he's coming to TFC. So from one hand
invite him
to the other.
Invite him over for dinner.
Hey, he's always welcome. We're making
little,
soppressata, so chicken will help.
Exactly, little charcuterie board, a little
That's right.
pasta forno. There you have it, folks. Joe, thanks, buddy, for putting this into context. Can't wait to see him in the Reddies. We're number 24 from our understanding, so the jerseys are probably sold out already, but can't wait to see him in July. And folks, this is big. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Like we always say, hit subscribe, comment. We want to hear you guys, what you have to say on this feedback. Come at us. If we're wrong, come at us, man, and let us know what you think. So for Joe Choffs, Coach Frank here, and we'll see you on the next one.
If I'm a big Stronzo, just say it.